things are heating up and we got some really interesting information. I'm guessing all of you have heard the old underground hints back from the alpha. That's all in the past. Right now, we got a ton of new stuff fresh from Dragonflight directly. We have discovered a few artifacts related to Deathwing that are like old gods, sort of corrupting their minds and turning people insane and drawing them below. One is a so-called shadowy whisper. The other is actually surprisingly related to Order, which means it could be a Titan mind control artifact. Furthermore, there are other hints that we are actually going underground from some datamined models, and who knows what else we could discover. There is more legacy of Neltharion, possibly a secret lab where the Dractyl were created or something brand new. So what is all this new information? Just a quick before we get into the video, I'd like to show you guys this video sponsored, the Ridge wallet. If you guys are using a really bulky wallet, check out Ridge. I've been using it for 2 years. It is literally the only wallet that I've used. Now, additionally, they started creating key cases as well, and it really matches the wallet at the same time. Now, best of all, until December 22nd, if you use my link in the description, you can get up to 40% off. So it's never really been a better time to get your Ridge wallet. Check out my link in the description below and use code DORON. So already back in the Dragonflight Alpha, the very early alpha, we actually had multiple hints that something will be happening in the underground, and the reason we came to this conclusion that it might be related to 10.1 is because literally a map was datamined that was called Underground Keep Secret until 10.1. Like, if you wanted an actual hint, this would be the most obvious one. Then as the Dragonflight testing progressed, we got more information, the well-known and the fabled Alderman documents that revealed a lot more about the actual nature of the Titans and a bunch of other stuff. However, more importantly to this topic, the documents actually told us that there is literally a Titan rebel group that turned against their creators, the Titan Keepers, and that the Titan Keepers have tried to get rid of them on multiple occasions, but they essentially failed every single time. They have apparently bunkered themselves up in a place called Avalorem that is possibly underground. Another hint we got was from an observation in regards to the Earthen and how a certain group of Earthen was sent to fix up a hole, but eventually, as they were struck by a curse of flesh, they essentially turned into dwarves. The reason this is relevant is because they have about the same culture, language, temperament, and pretty much everything else as the dwarves, even though they never physically interacted with them in any way, shape, or form. Now, if you guys have been keeping up with the development, all of this is actually old news, but the reason I'm making this video is because there is actually about twice as much news as this, and it is super interesting. It could really be a huge hint for what is to come in 10.1, or it could also be a hint for what will be happening at the end of Dragonflight and possibly the next expansion afterwards. So to start off with a bit of a less interesting hint, but nonetheless important, is that in the alpha we have actually datamined this really weird sort of kobold mole people model that almost certainly seems like something that will be found under the ground with huge claws for digging, yet no one thus far has reported to have seen them yet on the Dragon Isles, which could be a hint that they are 10.1 content and possibly the cousins of the well-known and the well-loved kobold. I mean, we have the centaur, the gnolls, why not really add the kobolds into the mix as well? It's pretty obvious that Blizzard is just trying to stir up some nostalgia with these classic enemies with this expansion. However, what is actually relevant and crazy interesting information is that we are discovering these weird artifacts all across the Dragon Isles that are possibly related to the old gods, as they're literally doing what the old gods do best. They're whispering into those that are near it and ultimately driving them insane. So currently we have two important ones. There is the so-called Black Lotus and a possibly Titan related one called Veltrux. The Black Lotus is related to the Dractyl. It's literally called Neltharion's Locus, as we explore Neltharion's legacy in these questlines. It says things like, "Your mind to command and disobedience brings pain," and it also has this enchanting melody that essentially mind controls. The spell it casts is literally called the Call, so it's calling their minions. Now, the most important thing this thing says is, "Seek me below," which, in my opinion, is, if you're searching for an underground hint, this is like, literally look no further. Those affected by it literally say shadowy whispers from below. I cannot resist them, so something is drawing them below. Now, we don't really know what it is. It is said to be a part of Neltharion's legacy. It has ancient markings on it and has resemblance to other artifacts of the ancient machinations of Deathwing. If you may remember, the most notable artifact of Neltharion that we had seen is that gauntlet thing that broke in the battle against the Primalists, and that is literally the reason why Deathwing achieved chain the Dynactyr up because he no longer had direct control over them in the form of that weapon, so he had to just get rid of them. We can't really say what this gauntlet could be, but I think it is incredibly interesting because this is seemingly like a Titan artifact, but at the same time Neltharion was wielding direct old god powers after that broke, which I think is a huge hint on how the story is going to unravel, as he essentially wielding the direct opposites but also using them for a similar purpose. Now, what could be this below thing where we should seek this below? Well, some people say this might be Avaloran. Some of the other obvious hints, because these are called shadowy whispers, is that it could be a chained old god underground. Honestly, it definitely makes a lot of sense. I mean, Deathwing was using old god powers. The guy literally was corrupted by them and they whispered right into his ear. Could this maybe have been that fifth old god that has been the focus of just old god speculations for over a decade? Maybe he's chained up under the Dragon Isles, which actually makes sense, as when you look at it, the old god prisons were kind of spread across the continent so that they cannot combine their powers. Maybe, as Deathwing was the aspect of Earth, he had discovered that prison and he decided to siphon his power in order to create the Dynactyr, and that is also the power he tapped into in order to battle the Primalists in that video that all of us had seen. Of course, at the moment, this is just speculation. Another really interesting theory is that we might discover the mad scientist laboratory of Neltharion in this underground area, which makes sense why these artifacts could be related to it. We never really saw the place where the Dynactyr were really made, where they originated, and how this process creation worked. Like, it was kind of described to us, but we didn't really see the actual specifics. Furthermore, it could be a chained elemental lord, although I think this is really the least likely theory. Also, it could be a combination, a lab built in an old god prison in order to siphon power directly, which is literally consistent with what other Void users do. They just manipulate like evil energies for good or for what they deem good. Now, of course, this is speculation land. To stay away from speculations because we don't really know, let's look into another really interesting artifact from the Dragon Isles. Now, in Azerspan, we discovered this weird artifact called Valtrux, like literally, that is what the artifact calls itself, like it has a name, and it actually has the ability to whisper. First, it kind of whispers really slowly, then it gets constant that it essentially corrupts the mind of whoever is near it. What is really interesting though is that this person that we read the notes from was corrupted by it. It essentially convinced him that he's the only one that can bring order into this place, which is a super interesting applications, as this means that this is like a Titan mind control device, meaning that they might have actually used the exact same tactics as the old gods, just whispering until they drive someone insane. I know right now we are really early into these hints, but I think all of this is actually huge because, as I said, we had Deathwing working with the old gods and using Titan artifacts. Both of these forces also corrupted the water source of the dragons, so there's gonna be something going on here that Blizzard actually wrapped up quite well, so it's really hard to speculate on what could actually be going on. Now, another brand new interesting hint to note that further supports this underground theory is that in Azerspan, when you're sent to collect water samples, a researcher says that deep worms aren't that close to the ground usually, and something must have driven them away from the nest, which means that whatever this shadowy thing is might be starting to awaken and it's driving creatures away, and it's probably pretty powerful if this is actually related. I gotta say, I really gotta give credit to Blizzard, as they really managed to kind of wrap this up pretty well, and it's really not predictable whatsoever. Like, you can't really easily see it. Now, I remember in Shadowlands, for example, we could generally foresee what could be happening, but with this, there really is some mystery and a lot of things could be going on. It is highly likely that we are going into an underground zone. There are just a million hints. There are a million old god hints all over this expansion. There is without a doubt going to be some involvement with the old gods. We don't know if it's gonna be huge, but there's definitely gonna be old god stuff. However, these artifact implications are also super interesting because it looks like other forces may also use mind control, and it's not just the old gods. They may have been using it for a really long time. We have seen this previously with some of the artifact weapons we have used, where they sort of have a mind of their own, but this is also just really going to be something else. Honestly, I really love that there is just so much legacy of Deathwing all over these isles. It really is kind of reminiscent of the influence of the Lich King when we first explored Northrend, and we kind of discovered that artists had really affected all of these creatures on the entire continent, and I think we are set to learn some really crazy things in regards to both the Titans and the old gods. Thank you for watching. Check out how Taylor Still could be going right into old god hands by clicking on the screen, and check out Doran's Academy for videos on real world history. See you next time.